Good evening. Welcome to our virtual CU Anschutz Alumni Series, Happy and Healthy Hour. We are grateful that you are here with us today to connect with the CU Anschutz alumni community and to learn from our great registered dietitians at the Anschutz Health and Wellness Center. I promise you that you will not be disappointed. My name is Linda Williams. I'm a School of Medicine class of '84 alumna, the immediate past president of the Medical Alumni Association, and an adult psychiatrist in private practice here in the Denver Metro. I am proud to represent the CU Medical Alumni Association. For those of you joining us tonight who are alumni of the CU School of Medicine, the Alumni Association offers many opportunities to connect with your fellow alumni and current students, including our current call for nominations for the 2023 Alumni Awards. You will see a link to learn more about the CU Medical Alumni Association Alumni Awards in the chat. And may I just kind of move from the script for a moment to say that this is a very meaningful thing for your colleagues to be honored in this way. So I hope that you will hop in, look at the awards, and when you have some time, and see who you think might be worthy of receiving these. There are numerous ways for all alumni from the campus to get involved. Our alumni team is always happy to help connect you with alumni activities for your college or school. We will share ways to get involved and how to reach the team in a follow-up email to tonight's attendees. A lot of folks don't know, but during the year, the Medical Alumni Association has events for their specific alumni, but we also have events that are for all alumni, where no matter what our discipline of study is, what our profession is, that we all come together to share an evening at the opera or some other fun event. So I encourage you to check that out. So tonight I have the privilege of introducing tonight's speakers. First, we have Anita Bancroft, who is a registered dietitian at the Anschutz Health and Wellness Center, delivering various nutrition and wellness programs. Anita attended Colorado State University and earned a Bachelor of Science in Nutrition and Food Science with a concentration in dietetics and nutrition management, along with a gerontology interdisciplinary minor. She is a classically trained chef who underwent a 3-year culinary apprenticeship and obtained an Associate of Applied Science degree in culinary arts. Anita is joined tonight by her colleague, Taylor Grasso. Taylor is a registered dietitian for Anschutz Health and Wellness Center on the campus and community programs team. Her favorite component about her job is that she gets to combine both cooking and nutrition education in one career. Taylor attended Iowa State University and earned both a Bachelor of Science in Dietetics as well as her master's degree in dietetics. She has worked in a variety of different capacities with different populations, including chronic disease management, sports nutrition, and intuitive eating. You are welcome to sit back and learn from tonight's experts, dive in and cook alongside Taylor and Anita. Feel free to turn your camera on to join in. You can even face the camera towards your cutting board and share your food prep if that is your preference. If you have any questions during the class, please put them in the chat or share by coming off mute and asking them directly. I, like many of you, have been looking forward to learning from Anita and Taylor's presentation, so let's get cooking. And now Taylor is going to read a disclaimer for all of us to be aware of.
Hello, everyone. So we just have a little disclaimer up that we have to show before all of our cooking classes. I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud to you. University of Colorado welcomes you as a participant in these virtual activities. By participating in these virtual activities, participant acknowledges and assumes all risk of personal injury or loss, bodily injury, including death, damage to or loss of or destruction of any personal property resulting from or arising out of the participation in the designated activity. Participant releases, waives, indemnifies, holds harmless, and discharges the University of Colorado from all claims, damages, and injuries arising out of the associated activities. That's a very fancy way of saying, please don't chop off your finger while you're cooking with us tonight.
And if something happens to happen, then please seek help, because like, we can't help you from here.
Yeah.
So that's basically it. All
And
right.
I was just going to say, I was so glad to hear that death would not come about by virtue of what we cook.
Yeah,
I know it's very dramatic.
It is.
I get it. I really do. I get the legality of it, but it does sound a lot more dooming than cooking is actually, we promise.
Yeah.
So, and I know, Linda, you introduced us, but I'm Taylor, and then this is Anita, just so you know whose name matches with whose face.
Yes. And we have our camera at one place, and then we also have a big screen where we can kind of see everyone. So if we are looking over here, it's a little awkward, but that's where we can see you. So just so you know, our different angles here. All right, so we're going to get started. I don't know if any of you are cooking along with us tonight. You should have gotten the recipe and a grocery list prior to the class. And if you are cooking with us, again, feel free to turn on your cameras. We love when people cook with us. It's the most fun. And if you're not, that's okay. Just sit back and watch, and that's fine too. But first, for recipes, we always like to kind of go through and have all of our ingredients really laid out and ready. So I'm going to have Taylor kind of adjust our camera so I don't have to change my gloves all the time. But just so you can kind of see a little bit down here, we have all of our ingredients kind of across the board, and we have them all laid out so that they are ready for us to use.
There we go.
And so first, I'm going to just kind of start with cutting an onion. So there are many ways to cut an onion. And I'm going to show you one of my favorites. I think it's kind of a little bit of a different way than most people might cut it. And before I start cutting anything, I will mention that all of our produce is already washed prior to starting any cutting. And that is just to prevent any of the bacteria that is on the outside of our fruits and vegetables from getting to the inside.
So that is Anita's little hint that if you have not washed your produce yet, which is something she has to, I remember to wash most produce, but sometimes I do forget. Like avocados, didn't know you were supposed to wash those. I learned something from Anita. So this is her gentle reminder too. If you are cooking along with us, make sure that you wash your produce before cutting.
Yes, please. So I have a compost bin. We do compost here at the center. We're very excited about it. I shouldn't say at the center. We compost in our kitchen. And so when I have any peels or anything like that, they kind of go in here, or anything I need to discard from anything I'm chopping. And the goal really is to minimize food waste in our kitchen. And so I'm going to show you how to hopefully just have the little root end be the only thing that we are getting rid of, except for the peel. So to get started, I always kind of just clean up my onion, because sometimes you get ones that are just crazy full of dried outsides, and then it messes up your cutting board. So I just kind of rub it all to kind of get it all off. And then I start by just cutting the front top off. And you can see I'm holding my hand like a claw. And I'm tucking my fingers so that my fingers are not in the way of the knife. And then the way I'm holding my knife is important too. So I have my thumb and my pointer finger are pinching this blade, and the other three fingers are wrapped nicely around this blade. And that's going to give me the most stability when I'm cutting. I see this a lot. This is one of the worst ways that you can use your knife, especially a big knife. And I know it seems like you're doing yourself a favor, but you're actually creating more instability. And then what happens is you actually start fatiguing the ligaments in your wrist and in your arm. And nobody likes that when we're cooking. So make sure we do the pinch and the claw method and cut down through the top of the onion. And then what we just did there is we made something round and we created a flat surface. So that's important for stability as well and safety in the kitchen. So I have a very stable onion.
We have a very weird shaped onion too.
Yeah.
It's not a very typical like round onion, but
Kind of oval.
yeah, it's like smushed almost.
Yeah, it's a sweet onion. So sometimes they're a little bit different shape. So one of the ways that you could cut the onion is to cut straight down from here, and then you leave the root end on. I'm actually going to cut off the other side so that we actually cut both ends off. And then from here, I'm going to cut straight down into the onion, and I'm going to peel the rest of the way from here. And like I said, there's a million ways to cut, maybe not a million. There's a ton of ways to cut an onion. There's no wrong way, I would say, to cut an onion. And whatever preference you have might be the easiest way for you. But hopefully you'll learn a new way tonight on how to cut.
It's nice to have multiple different ways to cut the onion
It
too,
is,
because
yes.
you don't always want, sometimes you want to like mix it up in the kitchen a little bit.
It's true. All right, so I'm peeling off the skin. That one's kind of being tough.
There's no tears yet
There's
in the
no
kitchen.
tears. I usually end up crying. So from here, I'm just going to cut straight down into my onion. And however far apart I'm making my slices is going to be how big my onion ends up. So I'm doing them probably for like a small to medium dice, I would say. So I'm making those cuts, and then I'm going to do a quarter of a turn. And then if you look at an onion, it has kind of some lines or guides, if you really want to look at it that way, on kind of where to cut. And if you look at it, it kind of follows my knife like this, kind of like a rainbow. So we are going to start by cutting at an angle towards the center until we get to the top. And then I'm going to actually flip this onion down so that I have more of a flat surface. It's more stable. And I'm going to continue cutting that onion. And the nice thing about onions is they have layers, just like ogres, right? From Shrek. So we have our own little nice dice that comes out of not making too many cuts, but since the layers are there, it kind of dices itself, which is nice.
Yeah, I was gonna say something we always say is the nice thing about onions is once you do learn how to dice and chop them properly, they really kind of cut themselves once you make those initial chops. So that makes it a little bit easier, especially if you are someone who is very sensitive to onions. The faster you can get them diced and off of your cutting board is sometimes really beneficial. Anita and I both struggle with crying when we chop onions. So
That's true. This one is actually very good.
yeah, this one's not bad at all. This one's definitely not as pungent as some of the other ones that we've had in the past.
And we've had lots of questions on tips and tricks on how to prevent crying. That's one of the big questions we usually get. And really, we haven't found a specific trick. The closest thing we found is if you wear contact lenses, then you're more likely to not cry. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is my garlic. So I have just this big head of garlic. I kind of pulled a couple little cloves off of it. We have this little handy dandy roller.
Garlic roller.
I don't know if anyone has seen one of these before, but it's just like it's a silicone, and I don't know if you can kind of see inside of it.
It's got like ribbing.
Yeah, it is ribbed inside. And so what you do is you put the garlic unpeeled into the garlic roller, and then you push and you roll, and you can kind of hear it take the skin off. And then this is a sad piece of garlic.
Makes it much easier to peel.
It does. So my skin is left in here, but I can kind of dump it out so you can see that that is a peeled piece of garlic. So that's kind of a nice little tool. Those are really cheap. You can kind of find them on Amazon is really the big one that I know of. If you like that kind of tool. The other trick that you don't need a tool for is putting the piece of garlic on the cutting board, making sure your knife is angled so the blade is down towards the cutting board, so you prevent cutting yourself. And then you just kind of give it a nice little tap, and it'll just break that apart. That's really the fastest way most people cut theirs or peel theirs.
And there is also no shame in using pre-minced garlic.
Yes.
It's not Anita's favorite.
It's not my favorite, but there is no shame in it. And it makes life really easy, especially if you are making big batches of soup. It really saves you a lot of time.
It does. And garlic is a more sticky thing to cut. So if you're wanting to try to avoid sticky fingers within the kitchen, that pre-minced garlic is something that can work really great. And basically the reason that it's able to be shelf stable and last for a long period of time is they just add citric acid to help make it last longer.
Yeah. And I just thinly sliced my garlic. Taylor and I were pretty big fans of garlic around here. So we'll probably leave ours about this big. If you want it smaller, you just run your knife through it. So I just chopped it a little bit more, but really you just mince it from here by putting your hand on top of your knife and then just kind of going around like this.
Anita and I do a lot of measuring with our heart in the kitchen. We are following a recipe tonight for the sake of the class, but we typically measure garlic with our heart. So there's
Sure.
oftentimes a lot more garlic in the recipe than maybe the recipe actually calls for.
More often than not. Yes.
Yes.
All right. So next up is our bell pepper. So bell pepper, you can get them in all different colors. They're really all shapes and sizes if you find them at the grocery store, which makes it kind of tricky to cut. But the easiest thing that I find is cutting the top straight down and cutting the bottom. And then I stand it up. You can stand up either way. And then I make a slice down. And then I kind of just cut into it and roll so that I'm cutting out the pith with the seeds all in kind of one shot. And so between the seeds, this is going to be discard, and then you can pop out the stem and oops. And we can use the top still. So I see a lot of people throw the top away. They'll cut off the top and get rid of it. Really, all you need to do is pop out that stem, and this is just perfectly edible. So I do have some seeds in here, so I'm gonna tap them out of there.
And you'll notice that we chose an orange bell pepper. So the reason that we chose an orange bell pepper versus a green or a red bell pepper, or yellow, I guess, there's a lot of colors of bell peppers, is because every single fruit and vegetable, the colors vary the micronutrients that are found in them. So the vitamins and minerals. So having a variety of color within your diet can make sure that you are getting a well-balanced array of vitamins and minerals. So for example, we have some greens in the kale that we're going to add. We have red in the tomatoes. We have more green in the cilantro. So that's why we chose orange for a bell pepper rather than a red or a yellow, because we already have some of those colors within here. And it's actually really funny because I make chili every single Sunday. It's a household staple. And I always buy just the 3-pack of the yellow, red, and orange bell pepper. And my husband will sometimes get them out of the fridge to cut them for me. And he'll be like, what color do you want? And I'm like, well, we already have tomatoes within the chili, so we need to have a different color. So anyone but the red. And he's like, no one else would think that way, but okay.
Yeah, trying to get the rainbow here. So you can see I sliced all of these into some nice julienne slices. And I made sure that I cut with the flesh side, so the inside part of the pepper facing myself. So there's the skin, and then there's kind of the fleshy part. If you try to cut through the skin, you're most likely going to have a hard time, because it is actually one of the toughest things to cut through in the kitchen. So that and tomato skins are both pretty difficult to cut. So if you just flip your pepper over, then you can cut through it.
Try saying that 5 times fast.
Right. And then from here, I'm just going to kind of make some quick dice cuts. Again, big or small, it's kind of up to you. I like a nice kind of small to medium or something like this. I like to have some crunch from my vegetables. Some people don't like vegetables, and so if you're one of those people and you're trying to get more vegetables in, maybe you want to cut them a little bit smaller and kind of, you know, almost mince them so that they're a little bit less detectable in your dish.
Another thing that we always like to mention is that canned and frozen fruits and vegetables are a fantastic option if that is something that you prefer. The really cool thing about frozen fruits and vegetables actually is that they are picked at peak freshness. That's another one that I need to say like 5 times fast. So they actually contain sometimes more nutrient density than the fresh option that is available. So having canned and or frozen fruits or vegetables is perfectly fine as an option if that is something that you prefer, works better for your budget. Also, I love it because it lasts much longer. Sometimes I will have fruits and vegetables in my fridge that just go bad right away because I forget that they're in there or I don't see them, and then they don't get used and then they go bad, versus they're in the freezer, can use them for quite a while.
Right.
So
yes. All right, so I might have Taylor move the camera a little bit more so you can start to kind of see the pot over here. We're going to transition to kind of now cooking a little bit more so than cutting. I've had all of my ingredients are prepped, and I have completed my mise en place. So mise en place just means everything in its place. And in the kitchen, you want to have all your mise en place ready to go before you start cooking, or it really just helps you kind of avoid running back and forth and running around with your head cut off. So I have a hot pan and I'm putting in some olive oil here. And I'm doing a little bit, just enough to saute my peppers, my onions, and my garlic. And I did mix my garlic into my onion. I don't recommend throwing your garlic in immediately by itself, but if you mix it in with your onion, it's usually pretty safe. And the reason for that is the garlic tends to burn pretty quickly. So we're trying to avoid that.
And we talked about that pre-minced garlic. If you do choose to use that versus regular garlic, that is going to burn a lot more quickly than fresh garlic. So just being aware of that too.
Yeah.
You'll also notice that Anita used olive oil instead of extra virgin olive oil. The reason for that is because olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, they are higher smoke point oils, which means they are more suitable for cooking. Extra virgin olive oil actually has quite a low smoke point. So it is better to add things fresh with olive oil or extra virgin olive oil. So things like a salad or dipping your bread into, those are better options for extra virgin. Regular old olive oil is great for cooking purposes.
Yes. And they have done some pretty newer research that has shown that if you are choosing to use like a lower temperature oil for cooking, if you have extra virgin olive oil, it is okay to use. But like Taylor said, it is the more preferred method for the extra virgin is with something that you're not cooking. All right, so I'm sauteing my onions here, and just to translucent. And so the translucent really is just, we want to kind of have a little bit of see-throughness on the onions. We don't want them completely white anymore. And I don't know if you could hear when I dropped my onions in, there was a sizzle. So that's another thing that I see a lot is either heat that's way too high or way too low. And you want to make sure, just like Goldilocks, that it's just right. And that means that you're not really having it too hot. So when I dump it in, it's not just going to kind of really explode and pop everywhere and burn quickly. And it's not too low to where it's just going to kind of sit there and soak up the oil. We want it somewhere in between to where we're actually cooking and sauteing and not really just burning it.
Our stovetop is also a little bit difficult because it gets very hot very quickly. So you might notice at some points, Anita maybe has to take it off the heat or lower the heat. And that is just because our stove is kind of on another level when it comes. Yeah, it's very powerful. So.
Yes. All right, so in goes my bell pepper. And I'm just going to kind of saute that for just seconds longer. And while that cooks, I'm going to kind of transition to my next move, which is going to be adding in my stock. So the recipe does call for vegetable stock. You could always use chicken stock if you want. This is a vegetarian version of this recipe, so that's why we use the vegetable stock. You can buy big containers of vegetable stock that are already mixed, or you can buy something like this. This is better than bouillon, and I promise we don't work for them. We use them in all of our cooking classes because we love it. It's a paste, and what's nice about this is you can really control the sodium content of your dish. So if you've ever looked at stock or broths or anything at the store, sometimes the sodium content is pretty high. So the nice thing about this is you can use a little bit less and still get a nice taste because you have control over how much you're adding.
And the other thing that we really like about it is it lasts a really long time. So, and you get a ton of servings out of one, I believe it's one tablespoon or teaspoon per cup.
It's a teaspoon, yeah.
Yeah, so it's 1 teaspoon per cup of stock. And there's quite a few servings in there. I think it's a good amount. So that's another thing that 38 servings. So that's another thing that we really like about it is that it lasts quite a long time versus if you have, so for like example, I should have just bought this week. Now that I'm thinking back to it, like I bought 3 things of chicken broth this week and when I could have just bought this.
Right.
So that's something where, you can kind of save a little bit of money too at the grocery store.
All right, so we only need a little bit because it's really just kind of 1 cup. And instead of mixing it, I do have my water here. But instead of mixing it into my water and then trying to get it scraped and all out into my pot, I just go ahead and take the spoon and I just mix it right into my vegetables. and it's all going in the same pot anyways, and it saves me a little bit of time and an extra step of trying to get it out of the pot. And so I just kind of clean off my spoon until it's nice and clean. And now I got my stock in there. Once I add my water, I'll have the true stock, but I have the flavor base there. And I add it to my vegetables before I do my water. And I'm also going to add my seasonings before I do my water. And I do this because whenever I'm cooking with spices, I really like to toast them in whatever I'm cooking. And the reason I do that is to really enhance the flavor of whatever I'm throwing in there. So in this case, it's going to be cumin and paprika and chili powder. And so I'm just going to kind of move this around, and you can smell it. I mean, it's just an incredible smell. I love it. I wish we had smell-o-vision so you could all smell it. If you're cooking at home, hopefully it smells delicious too. And I'm just going to go just a little bit. I will warn you, spices burn easily. So if your heat is way too high and you throw those in there and you just kind of walk away, or you have them in there too long, it will start to stick. And then you have the tendency to kind of burn them pretty quickly. So make sure you have the water on hand right away. And so you can kind of almost deglaze your bottom of your pan and kind of get that fond off of the sides and off the bottom.
Anita's using a lot of really great culinary terminology.
All right, so now that that's kind of deglazed, I'm gonna scrape around, get all of my spices that are stuck up on the side. I'm gonna get that all into the liquid so they all play nicely together and none of them kind of sit up there and burn. And then from here, we are going to add our tomatoes. And tonight we opted for fire roasted diced tomatoes. These do have a delicious flavor, these fire roasted options. Any diced tomato will work. If you have whole tomatoes, you can always open them and kind of crush them up and then throw them in. They don't have to be a dice option or variety. It's just a little bit easier because they can just kind of go right in.
Taylor and Anita, there was a question on the gloves and the purpose of wearing them in the chat.
Yeah, so we wear gloves in our kitchen because we're essentially a commercial kitchen, and technically we don't have to be wearing these gloves because we are making something that we're cooking. If you are cooking something that is not going to be cooked, it is a regulation in food service that you have to wear gloves. So if I was going to make, I don't know, if I was going to chop the onions or the parsley, oh, this is a good example. For the parsley, it's not going to really cook. It's going to be for a garnish. So I would technically have to wear the gloves to chop the parsley since it's going to be going on fresh and it's not going to be cooked. And that's just a health, safety, food safety sort of thing.
And typically, so in this scenario too, Anita and I are cooking for ourselves. So it's not necessarily dire that we wear gloves because we're both pretty comfortable. But if we're cooking for other people, which is what we're often doing when we're in our commercial kitchen, we're either running cooking classes or we're feeding people for different programs and different programming, then that requires us to wear gloves because we might be touching food that other people are going to eat. So that's just kind of another safety regulation. So it's more of a food safety thing than anything.
Yeah, great question. All right, so I got all of my little things in the pot. I put that back on. I'm going to just do a little pinch of pepper and then a little pinch of salt because I haven't really seasoned too much yet.
And then we are making, so we didn't even go into the origin of what shakshuka really is. Yeah, it's one of our favorite dishes. Like if we have a cooking class where we get to pick the recipe, we almost always pick shakshuka because it's one of our absolute favorites.
It's delicious.
It is delicious. So if you have not made it and tonight is your first time making it, I'm really excited for you to try it because it's definitely one of our absolute favorites. We love that it's also delicious and it's a fast one pot meal. So really you mise en place and chop everything and then everything is thrown into one pot. That's really makes it nice and easy. And it's also a Mediterranean, North African, Mid-Eastern region dish. So the reason that we say all of those different places, because there's a little bit of controversy as to where it actually originated from. So a lot of people say that it originated in Northern Africa in the 16th century, but it also has been said to be in numerous different parts of Africa. So it's kind of a little bit of a controversy over in Africa as to where it actually originated.
So I just added some chickpeas, some garbanzo beans, chickpeas, same thing. Taylor did drain and rinse these so ahead of time. So I just want to throw that in there. And then this is about to just kind of come up to a nice little simmer. And we have our kale that we're going to throw in as well behind me. So we just have this nice chopped kale, store-bought. This stuff is washed. You can wash it again if you want to. You can kind of pick through it. Sometimes there's some pretty big stems.
I was gonna say, you can, in the bottom, there's some pretty big stems.
Yeah. So if you want to just kind of sprinkle it in and kind of look for these stems, you can kind of pick them out. That's the only thing I would say with these bags is the downside is those large stems. And they are edible. They're just, you know, chewy.
And something that I love to always share about kale, it's not really applicable because we're cooking it and wilting it down in this scenario, but if you are someone who wants to try to eat kale fresh, but you think it's maybe too bitter or it causes some digestive upset due to the fiber that is found in it, if you massage your kale with a little bit of lemon juice and extra virgin olive oil prior to serving it and having it fresh, so say a kale salad, for example, that actually helps to break down that fiber that is found in the kale. So it can decrease some of that digestion issue. And it also gets rid of some of that bitterness and actually makes the kale taste a little bit more sweet. And it also softens the kale as well. So you'll notice that when you get kale out of a bag like this, or even fresh, it's really coarse and tough, but massaging it can help to soften it and then also to increase that flavor. We also always love to talk about dark leafy greens because they are a fantastic source of fat soluble vitamins. So vitamins A, D, E, and K. Now, the important thing to note when it comes to fat soluble vitamins is that these vitamins need a fat source in order to be taken in. And so if you are eating a salad with dark leafy greens, but you're nixing the dressing, you are actually not really doing yourself a favor in that sense, because those vitamins and minerals that are found in these dark leafy greens are not going to be as available to your body because it doesn't have a fat source to help absorb it. So if you are wanting to eat a salad with a dark leafy green, we always recommend a healthy fat source and not skimping on that dressing.
Yeah.
There's a question about if you can substitute something for the cal, like spinach.
I think spinach would probably work in this.
Yes. Yeah, you can definitely substitute kind of any green that you like. I will say we chose kale for this recipe because it's a hardier green. So if you really just don't like kale, maybe try something like Swiss chard, which is a really delicious green as well. You can do mustard greens to give it like a little bit of spice. Even something like bok choy would be really good in here. Spinach, you can use spinach. The only thing I will say is it will definitely wilt down a lot. And so it'll be, it'll be a little bit of a different flavor, or not flavor, but like texture within the dish. But you are definitely more than welcome to kind of play around with whatever greens that you prefer.
And if you aren't a big dark leafy greens fan, you could always add something like chopped up zucchini. You could add a chopped up green bell pepper, just adding in some other form of color. We always like to talk about how dishes like this, like these one pot style meals, you can really use up the vegetables that maybe are just kind of hanging out in your refrigerator that you need to use up at the end of the week. For me, it always seems to be a zucchini. Like I always buy one and then I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And so I'll throw it into a dish like this where really it's very customizable and I'm able to add in what I already have and actually make sure that it gets used. Yeah. So that's another really good option as well.
So if you were watching, I just kind of mixed in our kale and like kind of patted it in there so that it's really almost submerged into the liquid. I'm going to cover it anyways, but this is going to kind of help get that wilting started. So I'm going to let that kind of go and I'm going to move back over to this cutting board and we are going to chop some of our parsley. And the parsley you can kind of mix in at the end. If you want to mix it in and have it cooked a little bit, you can definitely do that. We really just kind of use it for garnish. So it's personal preference again. And one of the things that I like to do, you can kind of sit here and pick through and just use this method where I use like, I should try to be this way. So I kind of pinch here and then with my hand, I just kind of pull and that's just going to really get it off the stem. The stem is edible. You can definitely eat these. You can chop them small and throw them right in there. you can save your stems for stock. So if you make chicken stock at home, you can save it for that as well. That'll give your chicken stock a nice parsley essence, and you don't have to use the leaves for that, and you can use them for something else. So we are just going to compost ours tonight. So you can sit there and kind of pick through it. If you have somebody at your house who you would like to have you help in the kitchen, maybe it's a kid, you can kind of have the strainer colander trick where you pull it through the hole and then you kind of pull it, and so it does essentially the same thing, to where we have all of the leaves.
The leaves left
Yeah.
over.
That's very time consuming. So I don't recommend that one if you're on your own and you're trying to get through things. But if you do have some extra hands that need some work, I recommend that trick. The one thing that you could do also is, oh, I need the knife.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just moving stuff when you were at the.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the other thing that you can do is just kind of shave down. So you're getting most of the leaves off. You can see there's some stems in there, but you can kind of go through and then pick those out. And that's just going to be way less time consuming. And if you're like me and you're just busy and you're like, all right, I just got to get this done, then that's kind of a nice little trick, speeds things up. And I can hear this kind of boiling away, and I don't want this to boil. I just want it to kind of simmer. So boiling is when it's going crazy. There's lots of bubbles. Simmering is when they're very gentle bubbles. So I learned in culinary school that you only boil potatoes and everything else is a simmer. So try to remember that and you'll be good. All right, so parsley, when I'm chopping any sort of fresh herb like this, if it's like leafy like this, I kind of try to basically bunch it up together, just kind of smush it together. And I will say, I see people chop their fingers a lot with chopping herbs. And the reason for that is because we're trying to hold on to it, but we're trying to cut and we kind of lose track of where our fingers are. So just be really careful when you kind of do this first initial step of running your knife through, really keeping that claw method. Your fingers kind of get lost in there, which is why I think people cut themselves a lot. And so making sure that you are very aware of where your knife is and where your fingers are. And then from there, I cut it all this way. So I'm going to kind of bunch it together and turn it, because I'm going to now cut it a different way, which I'm going to get a little bit more cuts. And from here, I put my hand on top of the knife so that I have more control and my fingers are completely out of the way for these more leafy herbs. And this could be the same if you're chopping something like spinach or cilantro or something like that.
Another really cool thing about herbs is I feel like they're very underrated in the cooking world. One, they add a ton of flavor when you're adding them either into dishes or as garnishes. They really pull out a lot of those flavors and emphasize them. But not to mention, they also contain a lot of polyphenols and antioxidants. So I mentioned that when we talked about fruits and vegetables, but herbs also contain a really high amount of those polyphenols and antioxidants, which can help with anti-inflammation and all sorts of other things within your body. So if you think about, for example, I always kind of go back to chicken noodle soup as an example. There's thyme and rosemary and all sorts of fresh herbs that go in chicken noodle soup. And there's a reason that makes you feel better when you're sick. So
it's true. It gives it a nice flavor. All right, so we're going back to our pot. Our kale is nice and wilty looking. So you can kind of see it looks a lot different than when I put the kale in. It's a darker color. So that's how one way you can kind of tell it's cooked a little bit is that it's darker. It's also thicker. So my sauce is a little bit thicker than when I started, which is what I'm looking for. And I think we're ready to get our eggs going. So from here, this is the fun part of shakshuka. So it is one pot meal. There's eggs in here. So we're going to poach them in our dish, in our liquid. And if you have a nice ladle, it can be a big one, a small one, then we're just going to make a little hole and kind of like scoop out some of the liquid. And then we're going to crack our egg. You can either crack your egg right into the ladle and kind of pour it in, or you can kind of do the hole and then crack it right in there.
sorry, I put them up there. Okay. I keep moving your stuff on you.
No worries. All right. So if you are comfortable with cracking eggs, you can crack them right in there. If you're not comfortable with cracking eggs, I would recommend cracking it into like a little dish and then kind of pouring it in there. If you get a shell in there, it's not the end of the world. You can kind of pull it out. or you can leave it in and it's a little bit of extra calcium.
Eggs are also a fantastic source of protein. So as we mentioned, this is a vegetarian dish. So sometimes eggs can be a really great option for protein. They have about 6 to 7 grams of protein per egg. And the other protein option that we have in this dish is actually our chickpeas. So chickpeas actually contain about 15 grams of protein per half cup serving. So both of those are really going to provide us with protein, because that's what we often hear when it comes to vegan or vegetarianism, is that people are very worried about getting in enough protein. So this is one way that you could add in some really nice protein to your dish, is by using those chickpeas and then also adding in some eggs as well. Yeah.
There's a question on whether or not you should wash eggs.
Washing eggs? I don't think so, right?
So you don't need to, I shouldn't say, it depends. If you have your own chickens at your house, yes, you need to wash your eggs. And that's because they are coming straight from the source and they're not interfering with anything at all. The eggs that we get from the store, they are, and then I don't have a better word for it, they're processed so that they have been washed like crazy. So I don't ever wash my eggs unless I get them from my mother-in-law who has chickens. And that's just because they're very dirty. And that's actually another reason why we don't have to refrigerate we have to refrigerate the eggs that we get from the store, is because they are washed. When you have if you know somebody who has chickens or ducks, if they have eggs, they'll just leave them out on their counter. And that's because there is a membrane that is encompassing the shell. And when they get washed or when they're processed at the store, that gets completely washed away. So when they're not washed, they have that little membrane film around them, and then they're essentially safe to stay on the counter until you're ready to use them, and wash them and then use them. But as soon as you wash them, you got to put them in the fridge. But yeah, store-bought eggs, no, I don't ever wash those ones. Good question. All right, and I am cracking these on a flat surface. And the reason why I go for a flat surface and I don't crack them on the side of my pot is because it really kind of helps alleviate like the cracks that the shells kind of get in there, and it kind of has a cleaner break. All right, so I went around, I cracked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all in a circle. And now I'm going to kind of make my last little guy right in the center. Just kind of getting some of that liquid out of the way.
Another thing that we always like to talk about with eggs, it's a really typical question that we get, because there was a time period where people were very worried about eggs and the cholesterol that is found in eggs, but the American Heart Association now actually recommends 2 eggs per day, 1 egg per day keeps the doctor away. So eggs and the dietary cholesterol that is found in eggs does not have an impact on our blood cholesterol or your LDL. That can be known as, I don't like to put bad and good on certain things, but I can't think of a better term to describe LDL and HDL. LDL is known as kind of the bad cholesterol. That's the one that can, if it's too high, clog your arteries and lead to things like cardiovascular disease. HDL is your good cholesterol, and that is protective against things like heart disease. So it is actually totally okay to eat eggs. And not to mention, eggs have a ton of benefit, and the yolk is what was a lot of the times, the cholesterol is found in the yolk. So people were really scared of it for quite a while, but the yolk contains some really beneficial nutrients, including healthy fats, B vitamins. That's where the vitamin D is found. Choline is also found in there, and that's not something that you can get super easily from food. So eggs are a fantastic source of a lot of really good nutrients, and you don't have to skimp on eating the whole egg, because let's be honest, the yolk is the best part. Like the whites are fine, but like I'm here for a runny yolk. That's what I prefer. And that's what we'll get out of a poached egg as well, is kind of a more runny style yolk. So don't be afraid to eat the entire egg.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of point out that I do have some nice gentle little bubbles happening here. If this was boiling away, my eggs would just break apart. So when we are poaching something, if you're poaching your eggs in here, if you're poaching your eggs just by themselves at home in water, we want to make sure that we are not at a rolling boil and we are just at a nice little simmer. And if you don't have to cover these, but it does kind of help it go a little bit faster if you do. And we're looking for those egg whites to be cooked. And like Taylor said, we do like runny yolks, but if you don't like runny yolks, you don't have to have them. So just the longer you cook your eggs is going to be how runny or hard your egg yolks are. We're going to poach them soft, but you could poach them medium or hard in this case. Kind of your personal preference. All right, while we're doing our simmering poaching, we are going to transition to our brown rice. And we have a couple different options that we like to use. Taylor's going to show you here. And so this is the one that is really nice because it's completely done. It's a microwave pouch. You microwave it. It takes 90 seconds.
These are fantastic.
Yeah, they're really great.
I use them at my house. Like, I hate making rice.
And brown rice takes a lot longer than white rice. So if you are opting for brown rice, but you find yourself not opting for it because of the cook time, this can be a really good option. So that's a 90-second microwave pouch. And then this other one that she has here, this is a boil in a bag. So I'm going to actually open this one because this one is, I don't know if any of you have seen these ones. And you don't have to get brown rice. They have all kinds of different rice with these, but we do encourage brown rice because of the fiber content. But you can see these kind of have, I don't know if you can see all the little holes that are in the bag, but you just drop this straight into boiling water and you follow directions. I think it cooks for 10 minutes. Yeah, 8 to 10 minutes. And then you pull out the bag and you cut it open and you serve it. So this is a parboiled rice, which means that it's partially cooked already, which is why it only will take 10 minutes instead of having a completely raw brown rice that is going to take on upwards of 30 minutes to cook. So keep these in mind. They're at the store. They are just as healthy as any other brown rice that you find. They just make life easy. So we like that in the kitchen.
And another thing that I always like to mention when it comes to brown rice and eating vegetarian style dishes. So what you'll often hear is that plant-based proteins. So for like example, chickpeas do not contain all 9 essential amino acids. Essential amino acids are amino acids or protein that we need to get from our diet because our body is unable to make it on its own. So chickpeas contain 7 of those 9 essential amino acids. And the ones that are limited in chickpeas can actually be found in brown rice. So cysteine and then what was the other one? Methionine. Cysteine and methionine are the 2 that are not found in chickpeas, but they are found in pretty high amounts in brown rice. So pairing a vegetarian style dish like chickpeas with brown rice will create a complete protein that has all 9 essential amino acids. I'll microwave that.
All right, so she's going to squeeze the package and then toss it in our microwave. Ours probably won't take 90 seconds because just like our stove, we have an industrial microwave. So yeah, ours probably won't take very long. I don't know if any of you noticed, but I swapped out my gloves after I was working with those eggs. I also swapped out my ladle. So I cracked raw eggs into that smaller ladle, which means I don't really want to serve my cooked dish with something that I had raw food in, especially eggs, or if I had a protein like a chicken or meat, beef, something like that. I don't want to serve something that I had something raw in and then something cooked. So that's why I changed my gloves. That's why I changed my ladle, so that we are all food safe here. I see that the most when people are cooking burgers at home. They will put burgers on their plate, they'll patty them up, put them on a plate, and then they'll take them out to their grill, and then when they're cooked, they'll put them right back on that plate. And that is just really cross-contamination of raw meat with cooked meat. And that's not what we're looking for. All right, so I'm going to take this off, and this is a little bit higher than I prefer. I don't know if my stove will go any lower. It is kind of crazy. So I'm just going to kind of give these a little bit of a jiggle to kind of see how they're doing. And it seems what I'm looking for here is really how much they're going to jiggle. So I want those whites cooked. I don't want raw whites at any time, no matter what kind of eggs I'm cooking. I don't want the whites to be raw. So essentially, I'm looking to just make sure that the whites are completely cooked. And I'm going to kind of go in the order that I cracked them in, because that's the order that they're going to really cook in. And these are looking a little bit underdone still. So I'm going to just let those go for another few seconds. Is anyone else cooking along? I know I can't really see the way we're set up, but anyone want to share?
I am. Smells
Yeah?
great. Yeah, ready
Awesome.
to eat.
Ready to eat? Hungry? I know it smells so good. The other thing we didn't mention is that instead of brown rice, you don't have to make this with brown rice. You could also eat this with something else, like a pita is another option, another great option that we love to eat it with. So it's kind of versatile. You don't have to eat it a certain way every time. You can kind of change it up a little bit.
I also love dipping sourdough bread,
Yeah.
like toasted sourdough bread, really good with shakshuka.
Mhm.
Highly recommend.
All right. Our rice is good.
Our rice is good. We've got
Taylor's
it plated up.
split up. You want to bring those over?
Yep.
Just kind of.
Yeah, let me know what you need me to do. I'm happy.
We'll just put these here so we can kind of see them.
I'm gonna move this down a little bit so that you guys can see the plated versions.
All right, so for dishing, I'm gonna kind of try to scoop this egg just so I can show you how cooked it is. It just keeps flipping over on me. All right, so I'm kind of poking it. Really poking eggs is like the best way if you're poaching them to tell if they're done. So you want that firmness, but you can still tell it kind of gives it that little squish in the middle. That tells me that my yolk is still liquidy, but if it's firm to the touch, that tells me my egg whites are cooked. So I'm gonna throw one of these eggs in there, and you can kind of see it more when I flip it the other way, kind of jiggles. So you got to get one of those eggs out of the way, at least in my pot, the way I have it set up, to kind of get a nice scoop here. And you just kind of pour it right over top.
You could also top this with mozzarella or feta cheese and some hot sauce if you're wanting to add additional toppings. I think Anita, I'm dairy free, so we skip the cheese a lot of the time.
Yeah. And then you garnish with parsley. So that's essentially the meal there. And I'm gonna go ahead and dish up this other one.
While you're dishing it, there's a question on the difference in the types of parsley, flat leaf and curly.
Yeah, so I prefer flat leaf. And I think that's just because I'm used to flat leaf in kitchens. I was always taught to have flat leaf. I don't know really the difference, like if there's any difference in nutrient wise. I don't think there's a difference.
I don't think so.
I think it's really just personal preference. The curly parsley, I know that it was used a lot for garnishing. So like the whole pieces of curly parsley was like a big thing in the 90s and the 80s, really. So I think that's kind of really what that was used for. You can definitely use it in this dish. I did have flat leaf parsley, and again, that's my personal preference. But yeah, I don't really have a difference for you there. Good question.
I'm glad you were here because I wouldn't have known the difference between the two. I think I've only ever used flat leaf parsley.
And it's nice that there's different kinds, because you can interchange them. It's not going to make or break anything. It's not going to change the flavor. It's really just the same.
There's also a question on, is basmati any better than white rice?
What was that one?
Is basmati any better than white rice?
Yes.
Better as in nutrients?
I'm assuming that's
Yeah.
probably kind of the route that they're going.
So, I mean, basmati is a white rice, and so we can actually
Yes,
move it now.
yeah.
I'm done. Basmati is a white rice, and so when we're talking about healthy and different choices, it's better. No, it's not better. It's more beneficial if you have brown rice because there's higher fiber content. And there's nothing wrong with eating white rice. Actually, we talk about having half of our grains whole grains, and brown rice is a whole grain. So even if you are eating white rice, I eat white rice all the time. It's delicious.
Same, I love jasmine.
Yeah, and there's just some dishes that, maybe just taste better with white rice, and that's totally okay. There's still plenty of nutrients within white rice. It's just that fiber content is really going to be the biggest difference between the brown and the white.
There's also just a little bit more protein in the brown rice as comparative to the white rice. So That's another thing when we talk about whole grains, and the reason why we support them is because when we're talking about that fiber and that protein that's in a whole grain product like brown rice, it helps to slow down the release of the glucose or the sugar into your bloodstream. So it maintains a more steady blood sugar rise and fall. So it can keep you fuller for longer. Sometimes when things don't have that protein or fiber to kind of help balance it out, you can get really high spikes and really quick drops, and then that will leave you feeling hungry like 30 minutes later. Now, if you're having like a basmati rice with chicken, that's a protein source, right? Or vegetables, chicken and vegetables, you're getting a fiber source and a protein source. So you're still assisting with lowering kind of that release of the glucose into the bloodstream. We just like to talk about the fiber content in rice because only 5% of Americans get the recommended daily amount of fiber. So we always joke that fiber is a dietitian's favorite F word. So are there any other questions at all? I think we've got our plated dishes. If you're cooking at home, I hope that you have your plated dish, and because it looks absolutely delicious and we're very excited.
Yeah.
It smells fantastic in here. So if you are also cooking at home, I hope your kitchen also smells fantastic. But if you have any final questions, feel free to ask.
Thanks so much. This was awesome.
Thank you. We're so glad you guys were all here.
Well, there was just you just shared some really awesome information while you're cooking, right? I feel like a fairly seasoned cook, but all the nutrition stuff you're throwing in, it's just really awesome. So thanks for doing all that. This was great. And dinner's ready.
Perfect. That's the best part.
That's the best part. You got a meal out of it. Now you get to eat. That's why we like our job. We get to feed people so they like us a lot. Yeah.
Well, what a wonderful presentation. And I don't know if you can see the chat where you are, but there is nothing but just outstanding comments for the two of you in your presentation.
There is one more question, Dr. Williams.
Sorry,
Susan
okay.
is waiting for her rice to be ready. Should she take out the eggs and put it on the plate?
Yeah, so if you're looking for some runny yolks, I would take those eggs out, definitely. Good question.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what a wonderful presentation, truly, what a wonderful thing. I hope that we can do this again at some point with another amazing recipe. So on behalf of our attendees tonight and the CU Anschutz alumni, I want to thank Anita and Taylor for sharing their experience and this wonderful recipe with us. Before we close this evening, I also want to share a special promotional code for this group for an upcoming class offered by the Anschutz Health and Wellness Center. So thanks to Anita and Taylor for offering a 50% code for tonight's attendees to virtual Fresh Take classes. You can find details on the class and the discount for tonight's attendees in the chat and in the email that CU Anschutz alumni will send as a follow-up to this evening's program. Additionally, there is still time to nominate an alumni hero. Please don't forget to go to those sites that are here and think of someone who you think would be worthy to receive that. Again, it's just a tremendous affirmation. If you know an alum who graduated from any school or college on campus who has inspired you, you can submit their name to receive a gift from the Alumni Association on campus. So thank you again for joining us this evening. We appreciate you tuning in and all you do as healthcare professionals for your campus and community. Have a great evening.